Hello, my name is Nadine and welcome to Hop Along Studio. When I was thinking about what project I wanted to do this week, I was thinking about goal setting and New Year's resolutions. And one of the ideas I had with realistic goal setting was to put your goals in a place that you could revisit them regularly so you'd actually remember them. So my intention is to use this tag as a bookmark in my books with my New Year's resolutions on it to help me remember what I had planned for the year and help me stick with it. So to start with, I want to add these paints to my craft sheet. This craft sheet has a very slippery surface, so it's very good for blending paints. So to start with, since this one has a dabber on it, I'm just going to pour a little bit of this out of the bottle. So just got to go easy with it because it does pour quickly. I will add the Mermaid Lagoon next. Touch of the Lucky Clover. And add in some of the purple and then the red. Once your paint is on the craft sheet, you want to spray it with water. That's going to help it mix a bit and loosen a little bit so that it will react well with your tag. So the next thing you do is actually swipe your tag through the paint. You see it kind of gets some really interesting patterns going on there. So the next thing I do is give it a nice spray. And then I want to let this dry. So this is dried, but I do want to add a few more colors to it. So I'm going to swipe it through again and see what I end up getting. So it turned out a bit muddier than I want, so I'm just going to dab it because I do not want mud. And I'm just going to wipe my craft sheet and I'm going to put down some more paint. This happens occasionally where I go a little crazy with the water and instead of getting the blend that I want, I get something that wasn't really what I was hoping for. And that's okay, that's part of experimentation. So I am going to rub that through again, and that's looking better. And add a little bit of water to make it blend a little bit more, and I will dry it again. Okay, this is mostly dry, so I'm going to add another layer of paint. So I'm pretty happy with this tag. I think I probably should quit while I'm ahead. I tend sometimes to overlayer. So what I really like about this is that red that I didn't like, I actually ended up blotting it off, but left this kind of interesting pink texture in here. I like the green and the blue in here and the red in the corner. As this is a background for other things to be added onto it, I think it's a great place to start, and we can add additional layers on top to add more interest. Before you move on to the next step, you want to make sure your tag is fully dry. I have a Tim Holtz stamp here. It's a Flourish one that I've had for years and I absolutely love it. So the stamp is Anonymous is the Tim Holtz stamp line and it is fantastic. The quality of the stamps is very, very good. I enjoy the detail of these stamps. As well, I am using Tim Holtz Distress Oxide Cracked Pistachio ink, and I'm going to be inking the stamp in places and adding it to the tag. I am not using the entire image, but I will be using part of the image to add interest. So to start with, you want to ink, and you always want to ink upside down because you will actually get a clearer image on your project if you put the stamp head upside down and stamp on top of the stamp like this. And there is our bottom image. And because I plan to do some things along the side here, I am going to stamp in this corner going this way next. we go. So we have some stamping that adds a little bit of interest. You can't see all of it perfectly, and that's kind of the point, to add a little bit more layering texture to this. So the next step in this project is to add your rub-ons to your tag. You want to choose your images and cut them out beforehand. This will make sure that you have a nice crisp image to rub on, and it doesn't take partial images from the other ones on the sheet. So once you have placed them in place, you want to take a popsicle stick and actually rub them on. You'll notice that the color of the image goes from black to more of a gray color as the image transfers from the acetate onto the tag itself. Just make sure you line up everything really well and keep a steady hand to make sure that you get a good image transfer. Once that's complete, just flip it on over and then add some of the Distress Oxide inks to the back. Because we're going to add a 2020 goals onto the back of this tag, you want to make sure that it actually looks pretty. So by adding the Distress Oxide inks and by blending them together, it makes for a nicer finish. And my last color is Cracked Pistachio that I'm adding. And once these have been all blended in, then you want to spritz it with some water to make sure that it becomes more permanent. Okay, so now that I have finished inking the background and I've let it dry, I'm going to use one of my Sakura Jelly Roll pens to put my goals setting for the year on the back of my tag. Okay, so here are my 2020 goals for the year. So some of them are relational, other ones are health related, some mental health related ones, as well as some art skills and some of the stuff I want to do with this channel and my website. So whatever your goals are, it's great to put them in the back of your tag, just because then you have it in a place that you will remember it. So I have decided on a few things. One is our Heartfelt Creations. They have stamp sets and they have all sorts of different stamps. So I actually stamped and cut out these clock patterns. You can also find something that's been pre-made. You can also do something completely different. So Tim Holtz has these flashcards and they're fantastic. They have all these little sayings on them on both the front and the back that you can use on your project. So my word for this year and for these goals is the idea of hope. And that doesn't mean that, we only hope that we will get things done, but more, I'm going to be very hopeful that I'm going to be able to stick with it and be able to really work towards these habits to make them a reality. I also like the idea of the symbolism of time. Time is something that we all have, and it's something that we need to use very carefully if we really want to see our goals met. So the idea of time and hope and finding ways for us to be able to meet these goals was kind of my symbolism I wanted to use on this tag for this project. So I don't really like the fact that these are just the colors that they are. So I'm going to use some of my watercolor paints to add some interest to them. So to start adding color to these embellishments, I'm going to start with a blue. I do want to try to bring some colors from my tag into these embellishment pieces. So this is a combination of a few different blues. This is a little bit of turquoise and cerulean blue together. My palette's a little big to fit into the entire frame of this, so I apologize. If you want to know a little bit more about how I do my watercolor, I will be also doing some other videos with watercolor paints in the future. So just stay tuned and or ask me any questions in the comments below, and I'm more than willing to help you understand more how to do watercolor painting in a really effective way on these embellishments. So I'm not actually using watercolor paper. Most of the watercolor paper that I use on my projects has a lot of tooth, and because it has a lot of tooth, it is hard to stamp images well. So this is just a higher quality stamping paper that seems to be taking the ink really well, so I continue to use it for this project. Now the clock face itself, I don't want to have it too dark. There's a lot of color on this tag already, so I want to make sure that that there are some lighter spaces in it. I actually like a little bit of shine in these, so I have this Winsor & Newton medium. It's an iridescent medium. Sorry, let me just turn this so you can see it. Yeah, so Winsor & Newton iridescent medium. It's actually really great. It's basically this iridescent type of paint, and you only need a tiny little bit of it to go a long way. So I'm just taking a little bit on the edge of my paintbrush, and I am dabbing it on my surface. And that's going to help add a little bit of shine to my clock face here. And I had already a little bit of gray paint on my palette, so I am going to mix a tiny bit of gray into the iridescent. I'm going to put it lightly on the face of the clock. I'm adding a tiny bit of Payne's Gray to this to make it a little bit darker, because I'm going to do the layer inside with the same iridescent colors. And now that I've already wet the paper, you'll notice that the color will bloom a little bit more, just because of the nature of watercolor reacting with an already wet surface. I'm using a tiny bit of yellow ochre with white to kind of come up with a lighter color, almost like a cream color, to put on a couple of my watch faces as well, just to add a bit of a warmth to it, but not adding too much color. So now that you have finished watercoloring your embellishments, the next thing to do is your hope tag or your sentiment tag. You want to try to add some color to this to match everything else that's going on in the tag. These Distress Oxide inks work quite well for colorization, just because of the fact that they have a bit of a chalky finish, so they seem to stick to these tags better than the straight Distress inks do. And ink in general, you need to understand what type of ink you're using so that it will actually stick to the correct surface. These slippery surfaces are a little bit more challenging. So to start, I am going to add some Distress Oxide ink to my image. And the key with this, because the moment I actually put my finger in it, you can actually see that some of the ink comes off. The key to this is actually sealing it with some water. And then you want to dry. Once it's dried, add another layer of ink. And spritz it again and dry it again. Now I'm going to add one more color. This one's a little bit darker. I'm just going to add to the outside edges mostly. So So now that we have these pieces, we will start assembling our tag. One extra thing that I did do was make this little sentiment using a old-fashioned label maker and some tape. I decided to use the word new beginnings because I like the idea of January being a time of new beginnings, of resolutions, and of trying to make some different changes in our lives that can bring us joy and happiness throughout the year. So the next thing to do is to place your embellishments. So I wanted to put the hope there. I like having putting things in groups of threes. I also like putting them in a way that will actually force my eye to look up the tag itself. So I am going to put those there. And I think I'm going to put my new beginnings here along the bottom. I did do extra spaces before and after just so that I could actually turn it into a little bit of a strip. So I'm going to use my Scotch tape glider to adhere these to the tag. You can also use glue. I find with so much medium on these already, sometimes glue sticks well, and sometimes with the heaviness of some of these embellishments, it doesn't always want to stick well. So I find tape to almost be a better choice, and maybe part of that is because I'm a little bit impatient. I only have tape for kind of the main areas. I'm going to throw a little bit of glue that does dry clear and put it along the edges here, just so that they will stick down a little bit better. And if it doesn't completely adhere, that's also fine. It doesn't have to be a perfect adhesion all the time. Once you put this thing in a book and it is put in a flat place for a bit, it'll flatten out. Take the adhesion off the back. The adhesion on these don't always work super well, so I often follow it up with these dots, glue dots, along the edges, just so that it will help it to stay in place instead of coming off and curling again. And just be careful when you're sticking this down, because these are an embossed image. It is possible to rub it so hard that you will actually remove some of the writing. And do the same thing with the new. So now that I've added the title, the new beginnings, I want to actually add one more rub on to this. Again, I think adds just a little bit more interest to that tag. And finally, I don't ever like having a tag without a piece of ribbon in it. I have this Tim Holtz linen ribbon. It's actually quite nice. I usually just take a section like this, cut it. What's neat about this particular ribbon is you can leave it as is, or you can actually expand it to make it look a little bit more thick. So the neat thing is it is kind of adjustable to what you would like to use it for, because again, you can use it as a very fine weave, or you can pull it apart for a thicker weave. So I find this brilliant because I think it's actually a really clever way that you can have a ribbon that is not just one way, that you can use it for different things. And so I'm going to just separate all of this a little bit, and then I'm going to ink through it, because burlap is a beautiful look, but I also want to match my tag a little bit. So I actually have 3 colors of distress stain. I have the Salty Ocean, Cracked Pistachio, and Peacock Feathers, and I think that will be a really good color combination for what I want to do to finish off this tag. So basically it's a stain, an ink stain in a bottle, and I just press it down and add a little bit to the tag. Not to the tag, to the ribbon. So once the ribbon has been inked and dried, you want to divide it in half, make a small loop, feed it through the front of the tag, and feed this small section through. And voila. So if you want, the burlap will kind of expand and contract kind of as you pull and push it. So I usually go in after I've inked it and I pull it apart a little bit more, again, just to add a little bit more interest. And I'm just going to tidy up these ends by cutting them a little bit. I usually cutting at an angle. Separate it out a little bit more, let it fray a tiny bit at the ends, just make it a little bit more organic. And there you go. You have a tag that is beautiful in the front, doesn't have too much bulk to it, and has all of your goals for this year on the back. So I hope this video has been useful to you. I hope that you have enjoyed the process and enjoyed the learning. And if you would like to see more of this sort of content, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I would love to see your comments below on anything you would like to learn or your comments on this particular video. I hope that you have a great week, and I will see you next time.